Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani, and today we're going to be back in Canada for another episode. So let's get into it, shall we? Thomas Donald Bruce McArthur, who goes by Bruce, was born on October 8th, 1951, in Lindsay, Ontario. Bruce was the youngest of two with an older sister. But throughout his life, his parents fostered numerous other children. One report says up to 10 at a time. It was during this time when children with behavioral issues were sent to people like the McArthurs and used to work on their farm, hoping that the hard work would suddenly turn them into respectable teens and then adults. Bruce's father was a Presbyterian. His mother is said to be a Catholic. But of his father, Bruce said that he believed his father knew of his hidden homosexuality and used manual labor as a means to try and break him. Bruce went to school in Fenland Falls, reporting that he was a shy and poor student. Other classmates stated that he was, quote, a teacher's pet and a tattletale who never fit in with the other boys at the one-room schoolhouse he attended, end quote. Though later, he did meet his future wife, Janice Campbell, while in high school and graduated in 1969. The two continued dating and married after 5 years together, when Bruce was 23 at the time. At that same time, he earned his business diploma, and the two then moved to an apartment building in Toronto in the late 1970s. Bruce worked at Eaton's, a department store, and shortly after the couple moved away, Bruce's father was placed in a nursing home after discovering a brain tumor. His mother almost immediately began a relationship with someone new, causing Bruce to cut ties with her. And while Bruce speaks of how hard his father was on him, from the time his father was diagnosed, Bruce immediately began traveling between Toronto and Kawartha Lakes to take care of him and the farm. His mother was subsequently diagnosed with terminal cancer and died 2 weeks after the diagnosis. Bruce was about 26 at the time. In 1979, Bruce and his wife moved to Oshawa, and Bruce worked as a salesman for the McGregor Stock Company, working his way up to account manager. In 1981, his father passed away. Shortly after, Bruce and his wife had their first child, a girl, followed by a boy 2 years later. Bruce became active in the Presbyterian Church in the community, and as the children grew, it was clear that Bruce's son was socially inept and likely had a learning disorder. By the 1990s, his son had behavioral issues. Around the same time, Bruce began having affairs of his own with men. Financially, the couple started having issues as well, and Bruce leaned into the church, though it didn't really seem to alleviate anything at this time. Eventually, Bruce cut off intimate relations with his wife. According to him, he was afraid of passing an STI to her. In time, he told her that he was gay, and after a time, the children were also informed. The family stayed together for another year before Bruce moved to Toronto in 1997, and at 46, started his first same-sex relationship. According to All That's Interesting, Bruce became very active in the gay community in Toronto, frequenting bars in church and Wellesley, and having many relationships with different men. According to the Toronto Star, Bruce also worked part-time as a mall Santa in Toronto. Then, on October 31st, 2001, Bruce ran into Mark Henderson, someone he had known for years as an acquaintance at this point, and had previously used him as a sex worker. Bruce followed Mark as he entered into his apartment complex, and then as Mark unlocked his own door, beat him in the back of the head with an iron pipe. Quote, I turned, and he was there like a wild man, end quote, Marks told the Daily Mail. Quote, I can't emphasize enough how horrified I was. And then I realized, he's trying to kill me, end quote. Mark managed to grab a candlestick holder and fight back. And then he got to the phone and called the police, at which point Bruce ran. While Mark dealt with responding police who degraded him, Bruce was brought into custody still wielding the metal pipe, one that he said he used in self-defense from street hustlers. Still, he did confess and was convicted of assault in 2003, getting a year of house arrest and 3 years of probation. In addition, Bruce was barred from the church and Wellesley neighborhood, also known as the Village, except for work and medical appointments. He wasn't allowed to purchase, possess, or consume any drugs beyond prescription medication, couldn't carry a firearm for 10 years, and had to submit his DNA to a criminal database. According to the sources, this was because Bruce blamed his behavior on the combined effects of his Prozac and his use of quote-unquote poppers, a muscle relaxant used recreationally. Psychiatrists deemed him unlikely to continue his assaultive behavior at this time. The barring of the church in Wellesley neighborhood was due to its notoriety as a gay community within Toronto. And years later, Bruce was able to apply for a pardon and essentially had his record expunged. At the time he was sentenced, he was laid off work, but a friend, Roger Horan, was attempting to find a business partner in his new setting up of a landscaping business. Bruce was all in, and the two created Artistic Design Ltd. Bruce did the bulk of the manual labor, and Roger found clients. Bruce's reputation soon was filled with glowing reviews, to the point where he eventually bought out his friend Roger and worked the business solo. Karen Fraser, an old family friend, learned of Bruce's business through his sister. She told Karen of Bruce trying to put his gardening equipment in his apartment, even at one point using the elevator to bring up a lawnmower. Karen and Bruce began talking, and an arrangement was made. He could store his things in her double garage that was not being used, and in return, Bruce landscaped her yard for free. Bruce continued working and did relatively well. In 2006, with probation over, he returned to the Village and joined a club of gay dads who would occasionally grab breakfast or coffee. During the day, he worked his business with his son, who at the time was on probation for harassment. At night, he went to Zippers, the Black Eye, or Woody's. Bruce also employed others to help him work, often recent immigrants that were typically South Asian or Arab. Skanda was one of those men. Karen remembered him. Quote, Skanda was so shy, end quote. But sometimes, when the trio were talking, Karen reports that she would make a wisecrack, which was often missed by Bruce. Quote, Skanda looked at me and started grinning, and Bruce would keep going. Perfect straight man. He had a lack of ability to take in information, end quote. Joel Walker, Skanda's friend, said that he and Bruce didn't just work together, they dated on and off. Bruce, however, wanted a committed relationship, and Skanda did not. Bruce brought over many different men to Karen's. In a later interview, Karen spoke of meeting a man named Hamid, but the day Bruce seemed upset with him and said he wasn't going to work out. At the time, Karen didn't even know his name. It wouldn't be until decades later that she learned who he really was. So, let's talk about some of the men, shall we? Kandaraj Navaratnam was born in 1970 in Sri Lanka. He was the second eldest of 4 boys. In his youth, Sri Lanka was in civil war. By 1990, it caused Skanda to flee to Canada. Here, he was granted asylum. In Canada, he found an apartment and work, and he lived close to the Village. Many of those later interviewed reported that he was a magnet for friends. He also dated on and off throughout the years and was considered a wild spirit by many, who was known to skip town for short periods. But in 2010, he adopted a new puppy and seemed to be settling in. On August 31st, 2010, he had a date that seemingly went well, and then over the weekend was seen at a barbecue on the patio of Black Eagle and went over to Zippers. last seen leaving with 2 others from the back of the club as it was shutting down the next morning. After that, nothing. Friends started noticing the absence and grew concerned. An ex-boyfriend, Gene Guy, came to town and realized that Skanda was gone and his puppy was left all alone. He reported Skanda missing on September 13th, 2010. Abdul Basir Fazi, or Basir, was born in the 1970s in Herat, Afghanistan. He dealt with the toils until deciding it was too much for him and his wife Karima, fleeing in the early 2000s. They too landed in Canada, but Basir continued to be faced with hardship, ended up filing for bankruptcy in early 2010. He told his wife he was unhappy and began staying out late, finding himself in the village. There he made friends and confessed he was bisexual. One night in late 2010, 2 days before New Year's, Basir was at Seamworks and just before midnight announced he was headed home, but made plans to meet up with friends 2 days later. He then went across the street for a burger, and after that he wasn't seen again. Karima was worried and notified her sister, who filed a missing person report that next day with Peel Regional Police. Majid Hamid Kayhan was born in the 1960s in Afghanistan. Majid married in 1983 and had 2 children in the years following. Then the family fled once again to Canada in a similar fashion to Basir, also in the Toronto area. Majid divorced his wife in 2002, and after this he began going to the village and going by his middle name Hamid. On October 14th, 2012, Hamid went to a family wedding with his son, and after departing, he wasn't seen again. His son filed a missing person report on October 28th after he went to his dad's apartment and found his birds lying dead at the bottom of their cage. In 2012, a task force, Project Houston, was created to investigate the missing men out of the village. At this time, Bruce McArthur was questioned about the disappearances of the 3 men, all middle-aged, gay, South Asian immigrants who disappeared from church in Wellesley. And he even admitted to knowing 2 of the men. But police moved on. Life seemed to keep moving for everyone but the missing. Quietly, in August of 2015, Soroush Mahmoudi was reported missing. He was a man with a dark past. One ex-girlfriend spoke about how, when he was deep into drinking a drug, she was physically assaulted by him. But he managed to get clean, and his life did move forward. He was even married at the time he was reported missing. Sometime between the spring of 2016 and early 2017, Dean Lazowick went missing. At one point, he does have a daughter, but details about this are slim and hard to come by. What I do see is that he got into drugs and sex work. He was living more of the street life, and though up until 2016, he did manage to continue sending his mother a birthday card every year. It does sound like 2017 was the first year with no card and no notice. I don't see an official missing persons for him. Then, in 2017, Bruce's name is brought back to police attention. First, on April 15th, Salim Asin went missing. And then, on June 26th, a 49-year-old man named Andrew Kinsman went missing the day after attending Toronto Pride. Andrew was reported missing within 72 hours by friends, and his friends went to town to try and find this man. They put together flyers and posters and rallies, and they went to social media. Police then put together another task force, labeling it Project Prism. They entered Andrew's apartment and found a calendar with an appointment from the day he went missing, labeled Bruce. They used CCTV and found a vehicle that turned out to be a red Dodge Caravan outside Andrew's apartment at the time he went missing. Only one vehicle of the correct make and model which happened to be a special anniversary edition of the Dodge, was registered to someone named Bruce McArthur. Bruce had given his car to a relative, and police had it intermittently under surveillance at this time, though at one point it was lost. It was later found in a scrapyard, and investigators ended up finding DNA that matched Kinsman and Eason inside it. Bruce went under surveillance himself, but when he brought a man back to his apartment, police knew that they really had to act. Police entered Bruce's home armed with a search warrant to find the man tied up in bed, but still breathing. As such, Bruce was arrested on January 18th, 2018. Originally, he was charged with 2 counts of murder, the men who went missing in 2017, and then it was upgraded to 5. During a continued search of his apartment, a hard drive for evidence revealed 8 folders labeled with the names of different men. In each folder were photographs of his victims. After they were murdered, Bruce posed them for photos. In some of them they were nude, others they had furs on. Some had rope around their neck, and the rope was tied off as a garrote with a metal bar attached in order to tighten it. This was considered likely the murder weapon. A 9th folder was labeled with the name of the man tied to the bed. In addition to photos, police found victims' jewelry, along with a duffel bag that contained duct tape, surgical gloves, rope, zip ties, a black bungee cord, and syringes. While Bruce is brought to the police station, police are still trying to find the men. So, another raid went out to Karen's house with another search warrant in hand. They believe that Bruce used Karen's to store things, and that might include trophies or more evidence for this case they're building. And that's where they found them. Cadaver dogs led investigators to large planter boxes. Inside, police found several sets of dismembered human remains. Quote, officers spent weeks at the Leaside property, which they referred to as Ground Zero, due to the amount of evidence found there. In the end, 7 sets of dismembered remains were found in the planters, and an 8th set was found in a ravine near the property. Authorities have attributed 8 murders to Bruce McArthur. Abdul Basir Fazi, Majid Hamid Kaihan, Skandaraj Skanda, Navaratnam, Sarush Mahmoodi, Andrew Kinsman, Salim Eason, Dean Lizowick, and Kairushna Kumar Kanagaratnam. End quote. It took until July 2018 to identify all of the men. Then, in 2019, Bruce pleaded guilty to all 8 counts, for which he was sentenced to life in prison with the eligibility of parole after 25 years. And while sentencing certainly feels light, the judge purportedly stated it was, quote, highly unlikely, end quote, that Bruce would ever be granted parole before his death, as he'd be 91 by the time he was eligible and was already suffering the effects from diabetes. Quote, I do not see Bruce McArthur seeing daylight, end quote, Toronto Police Chief Mark Saunders said after sentencing. Quote, I do not see him in a public setting ever again. I'll take it face value that, in this case, life will mean life at the end of the day, end quote, Crown Attorney Michael Cantlin said. Quote, although there can be no closure from a crime of this magnitude, we hope these 8 convictions for first-degree murder will assist our community in beginning a new chapter of healing, end quote. And that is the horrific story of Bruce McArthur and the murder of 8 men within the village, also known as the Santa Claus Killer, as in some sources. To all those out there listening, be careful. It certainly is a dangerous world we live in.